Tracks on the track. Reese on the 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 tracks on the track.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephen Rosenbaum here with my colleague Erica Matsumoto, and we are going to take you on an open house here at NYC Media Lab. Now, ordinarily, we would be inviting you to 370 J Street. You would be in our fabulous facilities. You'd be meeting our students, our faculty, our mentors, and having a cup of coffee and wandering the halls with us. This year, we've gone virtual, but it's exciting. And today we're going to take you to one of our programs, and then we'll take you over the next couple of weeks to different programs. So first of all, just a quick explanation of the Media Lab itself. We're a consortium of universities, so it's NYU, Columbia, the New School, Pratt, CUNY, SVA, and Manhattan College. And we are supported by NYC EDC and the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. So our corporate members include 20 fantastic companies, including A&E, Bloomberg, Estee Lauder, Spectrum, Viacom, Verizon, and more. All of them working together with our partners to explore the future of media, technology, AI, and machine learning. And really, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the core technologies that we work in. We work in data science, we work in spatial computing, as you're going to see today, future interfaces, and creative technology. And we provide three real areas of programming: corporate innovation, our venture platform, which is the Combine, and then executive education. So today, we're going to take you into a program that we have worked on with the New York Times. And to begin with, I wanted to invite our friend and colleague from the New York Times, Aaron Wasserman. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, great to be here, Steve.
Just to begin with, tell us a little bit about the R&D space at the Times.
Yeah, so the R&D team at the Times lives inside the newsroom. We've been around for this iteration of R&D at the Times has been around for about 3 years. And the last 2 years have really been defining for us in our ability to go really deep on emerging technologies that could have very large impacts for the Times long term. We're really set up to invest in the things that could be the biggest opportunity areas for the Times in the future as a publisher and as a business. Those technologies look like machine learning, 5G, spatial computing, and we're set up in a way that allows us to invest in those technologies without being on the treadmill of news. And that's really what defines us within the newsroom. If you walk around the newsroom and you kind of go grab a random person and you ask them what they're working on, they're going to tell you that they're focused on some type of editorial direction. I'm working on our Olympics coverage, or I'm working on an investigative piece. Maybe it publishes tomorrow, maybe it publishes a year down the road. But with our team, we're not focused on a specific coverage area. We're not focused on a specific story that has a target publish date. We're focused on developing capabilities that can change the type of journalism that we're able to create. So new techniques for news gathering, new techniques for storytelling.
Thanks for that introduction, Aaron. So this year, our challenge focused on applications of spatial computing and immersive tech for journalism. Let's start by defining that. How would you explain spatial computing and immersive tech in your field?
Well, going back almost 2 years now, the Times has done quite a bit with pioneering the field of 3D journalism and working on pieces of storytelling that could be viewed within camera. So AR journalism. And that started about 18 months ago with our Olympics coverage, our Winter Olympics coverage. We published a few pieces that enabled you to look at the mechanics of US Olympic athletes in your space. So there were these amazing pieces of Nathan Chen doing a triple axel, and there was a Lindsey Vonn volumetric video piece that we published. And throughout 2018, we published, I think, 13 pieces of AR journalism. They were built with ARKit. and AR Core, and were able to be viewed through the New York Times app. And whether or not those pieces were, AR pieces, or they were pieces that were captured, using photogrammetry or volumetric video, almost all those pieces were features, and they were singular objects that you could view inside of your space. And so all of that work lived on the graphics desk, and that was incredible work that was done by our graphics desk and by our immersive journalism team. And so what R&D has been focused on is trying to think about what the world might look like, where it wasn't just about us creating these 3D individual features, but where the New York Times becomes more of a contextual layer over the entire world. And it's not about us publishing one piece of 3D journalism once a month or even once a week, but where our content has to manifest in 3 dimensions. Our content has to manifest spatially on a much more regular basis. And maybe that's not even, an intentional thing, right? That's the same way we don't think about the fact that we're publishing an article on the web anymore. That's just sort of the default. What are the new defaults in a spatial world? And how can we build the systems for the future that enable our journalists to publish content in 2 dimensions and in 3 dimensions, sort of all at the same time? So it's a pretty wide space for us. We look at it from many different angles, but it's really with an eye towards the future, where the interfaces that our readers are consuming our content through have evolved quite a bit. So we're not necessarily looking, the graphics desk and the immersive journalists that are on the graphics desk are still looking for those opportunities to do 3D storytelling. We published a piece, I think last week, about the effect of a cough and how widely the water particles, droplets from a cough, proliferate through your space, and why 6 feet is sort of a good average distance to stay away from people. That's sort of the near-term 3D journalism. And what we're working on is much more speculative stuff. How does the world change? How will the world be different in 18 months, 24 months, 36 months?
So, it's funny, when we talk at the Media Lab about COVID-19 and how it's impacting the space that we work in, one of the things that we come back to a lot is that things are accelerating, change is accelerating. And I think about my interactions with the Times, which frankly in the past has been a read in the morning, a listen to a podcast in the morning, and then a read in the evening. And now I'm in and out of the Times all day long. And so I assume that the time on site and the time on the app and consumption of Times content is going up dramatically as people look for good information. Is there an emerging tech piece that you're particularly excited about in terms of kind of the accelerated future of journalism?
Yeah, I think there's a number of them. I think that a lot of the things that we, the way that R&D breaks up our work is into what we call them pods, which are discrete exploration areas that we've built engineering and design teams around. And 2 of the areas that we're most excited about now have to do with natural language processing and ways that the interaction models, sort of as you're talking about, where you're kind of dipping in and out of a relationship with the Times, might evolve over time. One of our big sort of white whale as an R&D team is enabling the Times to answer your questions, right? To start thinking about our content differently. Instead of our content being these large unstructured articles, how can we use machine learning to reform the way that our content is stored, maybe more as nuggets, like answers to questions and answers, and how can we create many more endpoints for readers to access that information. So that's one of the things that we've been working on that we're really excited about, and that we think has really direct applications to the way that folks have been interacting with coronavirus content on the Times. As the story evolves, the questions change, and trying to figure out how we can most efficiently answer those questions and most empathetically answer those questions for readers is a real big focus. If you look at our coronavirus coverage right now, you'll notice that it's sort of FAQ after FAQ. We're updating those answers as the story develops, and trying to figure out a way that we can do that more effectively for our readers has been a big focus of R&D.
All right, thank you very much for taking the time and for participating in our virtual open house. And we're going to shift now to the program itself. And Erica, talk a little bit about the program, and then we'll go into the demonstrations.
So in our program partnership with the New York Times, we selected 6 teams across 4 universities to develop prototypes that explored applications of spatial computing in journalism. We had a team from Columbia University, a graduate student team studying computer science. We had a team from CUNY's Journalism School, which is a graduate and faculty-led team. We had a team from NYU, which is an undergraduate team in the Integrated Digital Media program. We had a team from NYU, a graduate student team in the Interactive Telecommunications program. We had a team from the Parsons School of Design, a graduate and faculty-led team in the Design and Technology program, and another team from the Parsons School of Design, a graduate and faculty-led team in the Design and Technology program. We took these 6 teams and in partnership with the amazing R&D team at the New York Times put together a 12-week prototyping sprint. Each team explored creative applications of spatial and immersive tech for journalism. This included creating mobile AR apps, looking at applications of volumetric capture in the field, as well as spatial audio and how it can help shape content and rethink content. And a strong mentorship from the R&D team, as well as access to the New York Times resources, as well as an opportunity for our participating students to be offered a summer internship with the New York Times R&D team. We worked closely with Yuri Victor, engineer and program mentor from the New York Times, Dalit Shalom, experienced designer and program mentor at the New York Times, as well as Amelia Pisapia, strategist and program strategist at the R&D team at the New York Times.
So we're going to have 3 members of the R&D program team with us today, and they're going to talk about their mentorship with the teams, and then they're also going to have some questions for the teams afterwards. But let's begin now with team number 1. So I want to introduce Team Doyer Street. Team Doyer Street is Sammy Levin and McCoy Zhu. They're undergraduate students from NYU's Integrated Digital Media program. And with that, take it away, Sammy and McCoy.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start off with a little story. At the core of Chinatown's dense cultural melting pot lies crooked little Doyer Street, dotted with beauty salons, tea parlors, and cozy restaurants. If you had visited the same site 115 years back, however, you'd be standing at the very epicenter of old Chinatown gang culture. Let's take a walk down Doyer Street in 1905. The Mandarin Tea Garden, New York's first Chinese restaurant, overlooks the Bloody Angle, where gang members supposedly carried out hatchet-handed murders. The Chinese Theater lies atop a network of underground arcades used as escape routes by the local Tongs. The Chinese Tuxedo Restaurant was the site where the First Tong War was reconciled over a classic Chinese feast. Recognizing the storied history that can be quietly embedded within the streets we walk on a daily basis, we strove to develop a product that truly places history in context. I'm Sammy Levin, the team design lead.
And I'm McCoy Zhu, the team software lead.
And we're students from New York University, here to introduce you to our product, the Metro Archive. The Metro Archive is an immersive augmented reality experience that enables readers to explore historic city streets as they were centuries ago. Our product empowers readers to experience history immersively, enriches everyday environments, and contextualizes current events.
For readers who can explore Doyer Street on site, the Metro Archive app can be used to view historic buildings in 3D at full scale in the vicinity. Informational cards and photographs are also included to contextualize the area. To present an intuitive and streamlined user experience, the interface includes just one interactive element, the mode selector. By selecting immersive mode, readers can explore the virtual environment and get a closer look at the building in the vicinity. In historic mode, virtual buildings are accompanied by assets, bite-sized text, photo, and video cards featuring information like event retellings and biographies. This information is largely sourced from the New York Times archive, breathing new life into old articles. In contemporary mode, the virtual building fades out and new assets appear. Here, we included a restaurant review of the newly opened Tuxedo restaurant down the street and an opinion piece on the nationwide decline of Chinese restaurants. When tabbed, these assets deep link to their full-length article in the New York Times app or their location in the Maps app. For those who can't be on site, whatever the circumstances, we've also developed a version that offers the same exploratory experience in an at-home setting. This experience will be packaged in a New York Times Magazine article featuring photos of the streets, along with text explaining the area's relevance in past and present. One of the magazine spreads would feature a unique layout, including 2 columns of text, a small user guide, and a square whiteboard. This board includes a map of Doyer Street, along with informational modules about specific buildings on the street. It can be read by circling around the board, much like you would when playing Monopoly.
The entire spread is intended to be torn from the magazine and laid on a flat surface like a coffee table. By downloading and opening the Metro Archive app, then aiming it at the board, a new degree of interactivity is unlocked. In immersive mode, readers can explore the board by rotating it. If you take a close look, you'll notice buildings and module numbers are highlighted in orange. Depending on what module is being read, the corresponding building is highlighted. When stopping to explore at a particular building, historic mode grants readers a closer look at the old building on a tabletop scale. A guided audio tour draws the user's attention towards specific architectural features. Contemporary mode shows what the same building looks like today, and the voiceover describes the building's change in appearance and function. In order to revive a 115-year-old building, we used modern-day photos to create a 3D model. 2D photo textures were generated from archived photos and projected onto 3D surfaces.
To orient content in the environment, we leveraged Apple's ARKit and SceneKit frameworks. Our program first uses the phone's camera and sensors to analyze the environment and identify an image target like the yellow banner. Referencing this target, virtual space is oriented to match real space. Then, models and assets are rendered in this virtual space. Much the same functionality is applied in the print version, but the image target is the magazine spread, and buildings are selected by gauging distance between the phone and each module. When readers shift closer to one module than another, its corresponding building will be selected and displayed. At the large scale we're working at, some limitations are introduced. Shaky movement of the device in complex lighting conditions can cause models to be skewed, especially in the on-site version, as depicted on the left. Additionally, because our program relies on proprietary technologies developed by Apple, it is only available to newer iOS devices. For developers, modeling buildings from a limited handful of archived photos can be a tedious and somewhat inaccurate process. Additionally, finding ways to quickly align and lay out content in 3D space and test out the results in real time would significantly accelerate the development process.
If you've ever visited Boston, you may have encountered the Freedom Trail, an urban walking tour dotted with historical informational plaques. This walk through history is a simple way to support tourism, empower local businesses, and educate the public. Inspired by Jazz Lyle's Hidden Stories project, the Metro Archive can one-up the Freedom Trail by offering an expansive series of walkable experiences where entire city blocks can tell their stories in immersive 3D. Picture a high school field trip to a historic site guided by AR, or a family of New Yorkers discovering something new about the block they live on. We see the Metro Archive as the first step towards a seamless digital layer over the real world and a means to combine education and entertainment. You can test out the Metro Archive from home using an iOS mobile device by visiting the link on the screen. We'd love it if you shared this experience with friends and family, and we'd appreciate any feedback you may have. Thank you for your time, and we'll gladly take any questions you may have about the project.
Thank you, Sammy. That's terrific.
We'd like to take a moment and introduce the amazing R&D program team that we worked with throughout the course of this program. Thank you to all of the mentors as well as guest speakers who participated throughout the 12-week program. We worked closely with Yuri Victor, engineer and program mentor from the New York Times, Dalit Shalom, experienced designer and program mentor at the New York Times, as well as Amelia Pisapia, program strategist at the R&D team at the New York Times.
So guys, you know these guys well. So you dig in, and then I have some questions for the team broadly. But let's start with the Times team.
I can start. So Sammy and McCoy, thank you guys so much for sharing your work. I think it's really been fascinating to see this project evolve, and also just kind of see where you've let the project take you. I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you landed on the part of the project that includes or brings AR into print. I think that's like a relatively new thing that I haven't seen much of, and you know, it makes a lot of sense to me to have a project like the one you presented, enable AR in space and have that kind of like contextual layer in the world. But I really am curious to hear a little bit about what led you to bring it into print.
Yeah, so I think there are two aspects that really made us think that print was one of the avenues to work with for this project. So for one, we wanted to ensure that this was an accessible experience. So obviously the on-site version has a certain degree of immersion that you can't get from at home. But being able to see something at home, print is a way to access that audience. So people might have access to the Times Magazine, people might have access to the newspaper itself. And with that, we can work with some of the mechanics that people are already understanding of. So people understand how to read a printed map. People are familiar with reading printed articles. So how do we take these technologies that people are already comfortable with and then extend that through AR? So being able to make that gradual transition from how we usually consume media to what we envision it will eventually be.
So I have a question for the team. What was it like working with the Times people? I mean, now you got a moment with an open mic. Like, were they demanding? Were they difficult? Did they torture you? Were they hard and difficult?
In this kind of a setting where you're spending so much time developing a product, having somebody come in and say a particular aspect of it might not be what they wanted can be surprising at first. But I think looking back on all the feedback we received and being able to see how the product evolved, I think it was definitely a necessary step forward. So it might have been a little bit challenging to work with all of that feedback at first, but in the end, I think it was pretty valuable.
Did COVID happening in the middle of the program change? Did you think, oh, now all of a sudden this isn't relevant enough, or did it actually make you more passionate about history?
Actually, McCoy, do you want to talk about how COVID impacted the AR development process?
Yeah, sure. So before COVID, we were able to test out the on-site version, go there, take video footages, and run test run on our phones very easily. But after the situation, Sammy and I were all like not in New York City anymore, and we weren't able to do all these testings on site. So we also kind of put more of our effort into the print version and perfecting it as a result. I think COVID totally hasn't made our interest in history or into this program any less. It's kind of motivated us to continue to do what we do, even it is working at home setting, and nothing has changed too much.
Times team, anything else from you guys? I have one. So Yuri, how does this undergrad team compare to when you were an undergrad developer? Like what we keep checking their credits to make sure that it really says undergrad, because we're like, really? They're undergrads?
I was a econ major, so it was a little different. But yeah, I think that, I mean, this this team was incredibly impressive for what they were able to do. I was just fascinated by the idea originally, and then how they accomplished it, I think was better than my expectations. And it was just really incredibly impressive from beginning to end. This team iterated so fast. From week to week, we saw improvements that were just amazing. And so I was just really, really happy to work with them, and I would love to work with them anytime in the future.
Well, thank you, Team Doyer Street, and appreciate you guys coming into our virtual open house. Hopefully next year you'll come to our open house, which we will be back at 370 J Street. Thank you.
All right, next up, we'd like to introduce Allison Ng and John Packles, who are MFA students from the New School for Design. They are currently in the Design and Tech program, and their app explores applications of spatial audio. Take it away.
So hi, everybody. I'm John Packles, and I'm here with Allison Ng. We are, as Erica said, from the MFA Design and Technology program at Parsons School of Design. And we have been working on an immersive storytelling experience titled While You Were Sleeping. So today we're going to guide you through our concept for using spatial audio as a technology, the story that we applied it to, the process that we went through, and finally share the prototypes that came out of our exploration. So throughout the last few months, we have been focused on using spatial audio to bring visual storytelling to life. And this technology, we feel, has the power to make spaces feel close and intimate. It helps listeners pay attention to spaces that they otherwise might not encounter, and to components of scenes that they might otherwise ignore, which we feel is really well suited for journalism. But another goal of ours was to create something that was accessible to the average reader. So we wanted to leverage technologies that are already in use today and had low barriers to entry, but still wanted to push towards new uses for these technologies, really kind of in the spirit of the R&D team. So we started by just doing research on what examples are out there of audio in journalism. And we have these traditional mediums of radio and television, but beyond the rising popularity of podcasts, we found that this field is severely underexplored in journalism, especially compared to visual counterparts.
So to kick off the project, we brainstormed what specific stories spatial audio is good for and realized it's best at drawing attention to things we overlook and transporting people to places they can't go. So at first we were thinking of stories ranging from the Olympics to the elections, but we also considered unexplored spaces in New York where we could have access to documentation. So from there, we settled on documenting Hunts Point Market. So the Hunts Point Produce Market is located in the Hunts Point Distribution Center in the South Bronx. It is the largest of its kind in the world, and over 60% of all produce in the New York metropolitan area goes through it before reaching its final destination. So for our first visit, we visited the produce market late one night when it's at its busiest. We went to explore the space and to collect visual and auditory assets, which include still images, 360 video, and voice memos. And we returned from the market to be compelled by the still photographs and came across the realization that immersive storytelling doesn't necessarily have to be high tech. So since our first visit to the market in February, we created 3 different prototypes that incorporate sound and spatial audio in different ways. So for our first prototype, we focused on creating a storytelling experience that combines the print edition of the Times and allows readers to immerse themselves in a photo essay. The flow of the story is guided by a mobile web app that provides access to the audio content and invites readers to listen and look rather than read. The interface of the web app and the nature of a newspaper spread allows for both linear and non-linear storytelling. And then the coronavirus hit. Systems that are normally invisible, like the food distribution network, suddenly became the center of attention. And therefore, we decided to keep the story, but to move it to an entirely digital format that focused on prototypes for desktop browsers. So we kept the integrity of the striking images by inserting 1 image per page above the fold. And in this second prototype, it included a story guided by a narrator, similar to a podcast, Each image was associated with an individual audio clip to allow for linear and nonlinear exploration of the story once again.
So as we wrapped up testing for that last prototype, we realized that we had strayed pretty far from the spatial component of this project, which is really what we wanted to capture here. So for our final prototype, we designed an experience that lets readers hear the space and not just be told about it. So with the same images that we captured at the forefront, we wanted to let readers navigate and discover the many layers of these images. So to do that, we highlighted the ambient sounds of the market recorded on our first trip. And as a side note, we recorded these clips originally as just documentation on our first trip, thinking that maybe it would come in handy one day, but given the circumstances, it ended up being the audio that we used for our final prototype. So there's three primary elements in the interface that create this spatial experience. So we wanted to keep it simple, allow for exploration, but also create some guidance through the story. So first, there's a map that serves as this visual anchor to contextualize the story within the market, as well as a subtle progress bar to contextualize the reader within the story. Second, each photo contains multiple sound clips that were recorded in the same space. So they're discoverable as the reader drags their cursor over small circles on each photo. The sound recordings are mixed so that the distance of the cursor from these zones determines the volume and clarity. So as an example, as the cursor gets closer to the trucks, I will hear more of the trucks. So we had plans to go back to the market with all types of 3D audio equipment. But again, we were left with these assets that we had captured on our phones. So we wanted to use this interface to turn these standard stereo audio recordings we captured with our phones into a more immersive 360-degree spatial experience. So depending on your cursor's relationship spatially to each zone, the position of the audio clip in 360 space will shift. So if the trucks are on the left of my cursor, I will hear the trucks as if they are to my left spatially. So this story starts at the familiar. It starts at a local grocery or bodega, and then moves to this market in the Bronx. So what you'll hear in a moment once we arrive at the market is the experience of the audio in the space.
This is one of the nice things about going in this hour. It's just an easy drive. Okay, thank you so much. Can we park? Okay. Okay, thank you so much. That's it.
So for our next steps on the project, we would love to be able to complete the story once everything is back up and running and we can make a visit to the market. And we are excited about the application of this type of format to future times content. So we also just want to thank everybody that was involved in this process, both on the NYC Media Lab side and the New York Times side. It's been an amazing experience. So yeah, thank you very much.
So questions from our Times colleagues?
Hey guys. Another great project. I think you guys really were able to innovate here in a way that I wasn't expecting this project to go in. The direction that it took and the shape that it took is something that I would actually really be excited to see come to life and in real life, like as an editorial piece. I'm curious to hear a little bit about your decision to create this kind of like new navigation through audio on a screen. So what we just saw earlier was you were taking the cursor and hovering around the screen. What led you to make that design decision or that experience decision?
So yeah, this was a decision that we made pretty late in this project. From the start, we wanted to be forward thinking, but also create something that is accessible using technologies that people use every day. And after the city started to shut down and we kind of lost access to this market, while the story became a lot more kind of poignant, it also, we had to work with what we had. So the question we asked was, how can we create a 3D audio experience using only these stereo audio files that we captured with our phones? And the way that we ended up doing that was creating an interface for that was changing the mix of this audio to make it more spatial.
You know, I have to say that there's a lot of reporting right now about food and the supply chain, and that word gets used kind of broadly, and the general public is expected to understand what the supply chain is. But I find myself looking at your reporting and thinking that you understand the supply chain in a granular way that you could take people into. That I think is really, I mean, that's, I think why we're all here is because journalism isn't going to be the same thing it was 5 years ago. It's going to be something different. And I saw a piece of the future in your work. It was very exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, what we really aimed to do with this story, and when we were brainstorming, what we really wanted to do was make the invisible visible to readers, but also trying to capture that in a way that is, different and more innovative than a typical digital story that you just read, or again, as we were talking about podcasts that you just hear, and how to sort of mix these different sorts of media to capture new audiences.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say, I think this is Times quality journalism. It's incredibly impressive. And when you got access the first time, or sort of got access, and then this happened, you weren't able to access the facility again. I was kind of worried about how this would change. And on all fronts, I'm really impressed with how you pivoted to print, how you came up with this longer story that actually was what was happening in the world right now. That was incredibly impressive. That change, that ability to think through what was happening and tell that story is exactly what we aspire to do as journalists at the Times. So congratulations. I just really want to say thank you. It was great working with you, and I miss you all.
And last but not least, we have a terrific presentation from Lydia Jessup and Rashid Kamal from the NYU Master's Program, the ITP program. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rashida Kamal.
And I'm Lydia.
We're both graduate students in the Interactive Telecommunications program at NYU. For this challenge, we've been thinking about what election coverage can look like in augmented reality. Today, we're going to be looking at what inspired the idea we pursued, the concept we came up with, and our research and playtests. And then we'll take a deep dive into the player journey of our augmented reality app. Finally, we'll end by looking at the possible next steps. To start, we looked at the ways the Times and other news organizations currently cover the election, focusing on live events such as political debates. We also took inspiration from the Times' other AR work and data visualizations about elections and other topics. From here, we narrowed our concept to a tool to improve the political debate watching experience. For example, we wanted readers to be able to easily ask questions such as, how does the speech of one candidate compare to another? Are candidates saying something substantial? And how do my opinions compare to others? The diagram on this slide shows a prototype for the shared tabletop AR experience. The interface allows each participant to evaluate and capture moments from the debate and to characterize those moments along different dimensions, from substantive to fluffy, or from polarizing to unifying. We wanted this tabletop experience to appear in any typical viewing location. a coffee table or a dining table of your homes, or even bars or other public places. We wanted to consider not only what is possible now, but also what might exist 5 or 10 years in the future. And to implement that vision, we decided to build for digital tablets, which have larger screens than mobile phones, but are still more commonly used than AR spectacles.
So here's an overview of the process we've gone through to prototype and test our debate watching app. We organized our playtesting schedule around the Democratic debates and did 3 in total. During the February 15th debate, we began with a paper prototype to simply test the interaction of placing moments on a grid while watching the debate live. We had 9 people participate, and an example of what one person said is, "It made me more engaged in listening to the responses opposed to how I would normally." This was really exciting to hear, and we moved forward with making a simple AR iPad app version for the February 25th debate. To create the board and interaction in AR, we used Unity and AR Foundation with an image marker. We had 15 playtesters this time, placing virtual cubes on a virtual board using UI sliders and buttons. We also had the New York Times live debate coverage up on a screen to test the engagement with live chat. One player told us, "Recognizing that I could get a gauge from the cubes, what I am thinking versus what other people are thinking was interesting." We had been simulating networking by having playtesters share iPads, but for the March 15th debate, we added real networking to our AR app using Google's Firebase. We held a virtual debate watching party over Zoom with live video and chat going while we tested the iPad with our roommates. We received feedback that was helpful for thinking about next steps for finalizing the app. In particular, one of our roommates told us, "If I were engaging with this afterwards, it would be cool to look back and see how did the candidates rank." So here's a close-up of the version of the app in action in my living room. And because this is networked, some of the cubes you're seeing here were placed by Rashida in her living room. For this prototype, we also added a filtering feature to highlight cubes by topic, which you can see here. This slide shows all moments related to healthcare highlighted with a sphere. From this last playtest, we identified several next steps in order to create the final version of our app, which we'll go through now.
Using the feedback from both experts and our playtesters, we began to imagine the interface of the app. In the next few slides, you'll see how we've structured the interface to orient the user, simplified key interactions, and added the possibility of a live chat that integrates the Times' current coverage. When the user opens the app, they're greeted by an onboarding screen. First, they're oriented towards a toggle, which allows them to access the 2 available modes in the app, the live chat mode and the data viz mode. The user is made aware of both its function and its location in the app. Next, the user is introduced to 3 key buttons that appear in data viz mode: to place the cubes, to filter the cubes, and to view tabletops from other viewing parties. Again, the user is oriented towards the location of the buttons in the app. Next, we see what the app looks like in data viz mode. In this mode, the AR tabletop will appear where it sees the Times logo image marker. The user can place different cubes by using the Place Cube button to select a candidate, and then press directly onto the tabletop arena to select the location. Let's take a deeper look at the tabletop visualization.
So similar to our prototype, each user sees the board on their own device. It's about the size of a Scrabble board, and the middle area indicated here is where the interaction happens. To establish virtual presence, each player is represented in the arena with a star avatar. Based on user feedback, we've simplified the board to have 4 of what we're calling buckets rather than granular axes. The icons in the corners represent the same scales of fluff to substance currently viewed on top of the board, and polarizing and unifying currently viewed on the side of the board. So to place a cube, let's say I hear Elizabeth Warren answering a question about healthcare, and I think what she's saying is both substantive and unifying. I could tap the lower right quadrant to add a cube there. As cubes are placed and the gameplay progresses, patterns begin to emerge. Although they are not as granular, this is where insights can be provided afterwards or even in real time. For example, an interaction we are planning is to allow players to tap piles for summary statistics and analysis, such as breakdown by candidate or showing filters by topic.
Jumping back into the interface view, we can now see the live chat mode. The comments from you and other viewers from your party appear in the center of the screen, with viewers' names noted below each speech bubble. Comments from New York Times reporters are accompanied by an additional icon. Like other live streaming services, you can add simpler expressions of feelings using just emojis. For future iterations of this app, we'd like to add some visual juice to show how animated filtering and highlighting can work. We also see opportunities to add natural language processing driven data enrichment to the content of debate speeches. And from our user feedback, we think it would be beneficial for future versions to have post-debate visualizations that highlight patterns that have emerged over the course of the debate. We also believe the app can be abstracted for use in other live events. This slide here shows two other potential applications, sports on the left and TV shows on the right. Sports fans could use the app to categorize memorable moments and their reactions during the game, and TV show enthusiasts could plot character development and story arcs. We're pretty excited about the development of this idea so far, and we'd like to thank a few individuals for their help throughout the process. From the Times, Amelia, Yuri, and Dali, and from ITP, Jared Thorpe and Sarah Rothberg, and of course the folks at the NYC Media Lab. Thank you for your feedback and support. We'll turn it back to you for comments and feedback.
I'll start with a question. Maybe it's the obvious one, but I gotta ask it. So you began this project living in a very different election world. What made you decide to stay focused on debates? And is your vision that this is part of the future of how debates operate in a virtual world, or like have you rethought anything as the nature of 2020 has changed?
I mean, yeah, I think it is really exciting, the idea of having a visual or like a virtual tool for debates, because you know, as we were wrapping up this project, you know, the last playtest we did it remotely because the quarantine had started, and it was actually really engaging and fun to do with friends. So I think that you know, I think the political parties are currently struggling with this right now, and I think it is something that's exciting to think about, is how we can be in spaces together. I think we've talked a little bit about maybe trying to do this for November with, you know, whatever happens, but it's still very uncertain now. Yeah, Rashida, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I was going to say, I do see some continuity in how people currently watch the debates, because even though they might be watching from their living rooms, often people will be following along on Twitter or the New York Times website. So I think what we've tried to do is kind of bring that into the same space.
All right, I have a question. So this project really brought together an excellent team from the New York Times R&D team and really took you through a 12-week prototyping process. What were some sort of surprises or sort of delightful moments that you hadn't anticipated that you came across throughout those 12 weeks?
I think it was amazing to hear from some of the other staffers at the New York Times. One of the staffers we talked to, Larry Buchanan, gave us some really great ideas about what translating a data visualization to the 3D space looked like. And actually the final iteration that we had with cubes or moments dropping onto the tabletop was very much inspired by that conversation. So there were moments, some delightful moments just in imagining, but I think our play tests were actually very delightful as well. And you can only imagine we look back on them, especially fondly in the present circumstances.
I think this project is such a great example of what's possible when it comes to interactive AR. We spend a lot of time on R&D thinking about how to evolve what live journalism could be. And I think this is such a great example of the possibilities. And I think a project like this takes on, you know, even more importance during a period like this in which people are isolated in their homes and looking for interactive experiences. So I just want to say, you know, we look forward to, you know, seeing where you continue to take this project.
All right, so in closing, I just want to kind of pose this to the Times folks. I mean, I think the thing that's so interesting about this project is there's an enormous amount of R&D intellectual firepower at the paper, at the Times. What made you decide to open the R&D process to students? And what were you hoping the outcome would be? And were you pleased or disappointed in the end?
I think programs like these are really important to run, and I would say they're important to run on R&D teams, because that's where the company has agency to and runway to experiment. And I think it's I think in this idea or this intention of bringing in fresh eyes, I don't think there's a better way to bring in fresh eyes than to also bring in people and individual who are also experiencing technology like this and others for the first time. So they're not necessarily confined to the conventions that certain technology might afford. They can really think about these not only as vehicles, but as opportunities and as ways to, like, we may consider them a misuse of the technology. But I think that has proven itself in this program. I think the Times was open to seeing something radical happen. And I think that in all of the projects that we had and all of the participants that gathered around the table, we had radical things happen, and they proved that to be true.
I think it was really generous of you to share with us today a journey both into these programs and also, frankly, into the Times R&D mindset. And as somebody who's both excited about the future of journalism and scared about the future of journalism, I left this open house day today more excited than scared, which is a nice place to be. So thank you guys for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, Erica. Well, we're gonna wrap up this episode of our open house, but we'll be back again next week, same time, same channel, or same social network, or same phone, to see another group of teams and explore further. So until then, see you all next week.